There's a moment I see again and again when someone says, I don't know what I want anymore. Not dramatically, not in crisis, just quietly. As if something that used to feel obvious has gone slightly out of focus. If you're there right now, I want to say this gently at the start. That confusion is often not a lack of desire. It's a sign that something deeper is changing. Desire is not what you argue yourself into. It's what remains when the argument falls apart. For a long time, I believed I knew what I wanted because I could explain it so well. And that, being able to explain something, can look a lot like desire. But it isn't the same thing. When I was young, I had a very clear internal checklist for relationships. It wasn't reckless. It wasn't dramatic. It made sense, especially given my family. My parents met at 14 and married at 21. By the time I was a teenager, their marriage felt like both an example and a quiet expectation. By 17, I already felt behind. So when I met my first serious boyfriend in college, he checked every box I knew how to name. Tall, handsome, Southern Methodist engineering student. Kind, steady, entirely appropriate. If I'd written that list at 16, he would have matched it perfectly. And for a while, that felt like desire. It felt responsible. It felt aligned. It felt convincing. It felt mature. But something else was happening underneath the coherence. The relationship required a surprising amount of explanation, mostly to myself. When things felt tight or uncomfortable, I didn't read that as information. I read it as something to work through, something to mature past, something to reason my way out of. The argument sounded like this. This makes sense. This is good. This is what you said you wanted. Eventually, what I had to face was simpler and quieter. The things I thought I valued were not the things I actually valued. Respect mattered more than suitability. Freedom mattered more than predictability. Being met mattered more than being approved. The relationship wasn't wrong, but it wasn't true. This is one of the easiest places to misunderstand desire. We often assume that if something fits our history or our inherited expectations, it must also be what we want, especially when it looks coherent from the outside. We confuse coherence with truth. We confuse being able to justify something with wanting it. Sensitive people are especially good at this. Sensitivity makes you perceptive. You can see what will work in systems and relationships and careers. You can build a life that makes sense. But sense-making is not the same as desire. What we want rarely arrives as a list. It doesn't organize itself around what should work, or what would look good, or what would reassure the people who love us. More often, it shows up as a signal, a pull, an interest, a sense of fit, before it knows how to defend itself. And this is where many people lose contact with it, because desire doesn't argue, it doesn't lobby, it doesn't escalate to prove its legitimacy. When it's met immediately with evaluation, is this practical? Is this safe? Is this acceptable? It often goes quiet, not because it was wrong, but because it was never asking to be cross-examined. This doesn't only happen in love. I once believed I valued stability above almost everything else. I pursued a tenure-track position in academia, and I understand it's kind of funny. I thought that would be stable. But what did I know? Not much. I committed to the life of the mind. The difficulty in leaving wasn't knowing what I wanted. It was admitting that what I already invested in no longer fit. Only later did I realize that stability isn't even in my top 5 values. Integrity, freedom, strength, beauty, joy. My earlier choices weren't failures. They were accurate to who I was at the time. They just weren't accurate to who I was becoming. Desire isn't what survives because you've invested in it. It's what remains once that investment no longer decides for you. Desire changes as we do. One of the most important shifts I see is when people stop treating desire as a demand, something that must be acted on immediately or justified endlessly. and begin to treat it as information. Information about what resonates now, about what no longer fits, even if it once did. Desire doesn't give instructions, it redirects attention. When it isn't immediately pushed towards decisions or explanations, it tends to become steadier, not louder. You don't have to build a plan around it. You don't even have to be sure. In my experience, desire becomes clearer when the argument around it finally exhausts itself. When what you say you want no longer matches how it feels in your body, it's tempting to read that as indecision or ingratitude. I see it differently. Often, it's a sign that the language hasn't caught up with the life yet. You are allowed to revise your desires. You are allowed to outgrow old checklists. You are allowed to want something that no longer needs defending. Desire is not a demand on your future. It's a signal in the present. And learning to recognize it without rushing, without persuasion, without pressure, that's where real movement begins. If desire feels confusing right now, it may not be because you've lost access to it. It may be because you've outgrown what you once organized your life around. Desire doesn't disappear when it no longer makes sense. It clarifies, but only if it's allowed to change without being treated as a betrayal of the life you've already lived. If this resonates, you might just let that be enough for today.